the story of the slave trade and how it has robbed the black community, particularly Africans, including Ghana, of its most treasured resources, has been told in many history books. Additionally, the numerous slavery relics and monuments left on the soils of many African communities attest to these heinous crimes committed many centuries ago. In Ghana, for instance, the Cape Coast Castle, the Elmina Castle, the Anomabo Fort, and the Christiansborg Castle are some of the monuments that easily come to mind when slavery is mentioned. In today's episode of our Untold Slavery Stories, we bring you one of the famed slave markets in northern Ghana, the Salaga Slave Market. Slavery is believed to have attained its peak on the African continent in the last 3 centuries. During the slave trade, many indigenes of the continent were denied their basic human rights, freedoms, and dignity by the slave merchants. It is therefore not surprising that several years after slavery, Africans continued to attribute some of their underdevelopment to the activities of slavery. They believe that the slave traders and merchants took away the region's strongest men and women. Ghana remains one of the countries that played a key role in the transatlantic slave trade, serving as both an entry and exit point for the slave merchants and raiders. Ghana was used principally by most of the slave merchants during the transatlantic slave trade as the shipping point where slaves were transported overseas. Apart from the coastal communities such as Anomabo, Cape Coast, Elmina, Accra, and Keita serving as shipping points for the slave merchants, there were many slave markets scattered across the country. One of these markets is the Salaga Slave Market. The Salaga Slave Market, located in Salaga, the administrative capital of what is now the East Gonja district in the Savannah region of Ghana, is one of the areas noted for the role it played during the slave trade in northern Ghana. During the slave trade era, Hausas, Wangaras, Nagumbas, Gormas, and other groups from different parts of sub-Saharan Africa, including northern Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, and Burkina Faso, as well as the indigenous Gonjas, lived and traded in this town. It is said that from the 16th to the 19th centuries, Salaga was one of the most important market centers in West Africa, where they traded in everything including kola, beads, ostrich feathers, animal hides, textiles, and gold. However, from the 18th to the 19th century, Salaga became the biggest slave market where humans were sold or exchanged for cowries and other foreign items. The town became a well-known slave market in the sub-region. According to oral history, the slave market was conducted under a baobab tree. Although the original tree that existed at the time of the slave trade died some years ago, there is currently a new baobab tree at the location. The new tree was planted in 1989 to maintain the historical relevance of the area. Most of the slaves brought to this market, according to oral history, were tied to these baobab trees during that time. One interesting fact worth mentioning about this particular slave market is that although most of the slaves were captured to be sold to the Europeans at the coastal communities in southern Ghana, the Europeans never participated in or visited the Salaga Slave Market. Some oral accounts suggest that the Europeans were denied access to the Salaga Slave Market by the Ashantis, who had control over the market. Hence, The very people who participated in the capturing and auctioning of the slaves were their fellow Africans. The slaves were either captured through wars or raiding activities. The African slave raiders and merchants would bring their captives to this market for sale, after which they were marched down to the coast for further transactions and shipment. Whilst on their way down south, some of the slaves could be sold along the way. It is said that the Salaga Slave Market was receiving thousands of slaves, mostly from other communities in the north and other parts of the Sahel region. But the truth is that the Salaga Slave Market did not just emerge as a slave market. It was originally a normal market where various goods, mainly kola, were traded. That is why the bustling nature of the market attracted attention from so many people. Some historical sources even say that Salaga was referred to as the Timbuktu of the South for its cosmopolitan population and varied trade. Apart from the slave market, the town also boasts other slavery relics, including the Salaga Slave Cemetery, the slave warehouse, drinking wells, chains, iron shackles, and spears. The slave warehouse, for instance, is believed to have been used as a temporary holding place where the slaves were housed before they were transported to the coastal areas for shipment by the slave merchants. The wells, also believed to have been dug by the slaves, served as places where the slaves drank and fetched water to bath. It is said that as the slave business became lucrative, other mercantile goods that were brought from the south attracted little attention. Even local chiefs benefited from the slave trade. When the slaves were brought, the chiefs took a certain number for themselves and sold them to the buyers. People benefited. These slave sites and relics, which hold a lot of our history, were left in ruins until the Ministry of Tourism took interest in them. On July 22, 2024, Ghana's Ministry of Tourism commissioned the renovated Salaga Slave Market, the slave wells, and the slave cemetery. Today, we pay tribute to our departed ancestors who suffered this humiliation at the hands of slave raiders and merchants.